Welcome to Dr. Scmit's Alien Universe. Now, I'm not an MD or a PhD. I have a Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Florida in 2005. I was a science student at UC Berkeley in chemistry and physical science and social sciences way back in the 1970s. And I'm much older now. But I've been a ufologist, an extraterrestrial researcher for 50 years. I've been mostly private because of the ridicule factor and the harassment factor from the Men in Black. The Men in Black have approached me several times directly, and if I move, they know where I live. So I've been quiet. I have no books written. I have no newsletters or anything like that. But the thing is, I have studied this subject in detail for years. So way back in the early 1990s, I was the ufologist for a website called UFOs and Aliens Among Us for 10 years. The website was owned by somebody from Ohio named Elric. That website was shut down. It was active for about 10 or 15 years. So I would blog on that website for many years. So I've been around for a long time, but I'm basically unknown because I had to withdraw from ufology because of the ridicule factor and the harassment factor from the Men in Black. The last time the Men in Black came to see me was 2009. I had two of them in front of my home. I live in the high desert, Victorville. Two of them in my home in an old 1959 style black sedan car. And I was trying to check my mailbox, but I couldn't get there because the Men in Black were blocking my way. So I got defensive. I said, "What do you want? Leave me alone." I knew who they were because I've been studying this subject in detail for years and years. I knew who they were, and they're called the silencers. Basically, any extraterrestrial witness or UFO investigator might have a visit from the Men in Black, and they will eliminate people if they think they're a big enough threat. If they don't think they're a big enough threat, they'll leave them alone. So I had to withdraw from ufology, but I've been on YouTube since the 1990s. And in 1992, I wrote a letter to Bud Hopkins, who's one of the abduction research investigators. He's deceased, and I wrote him a letter, which I will post later. But in this letter, I explained that I met the elephant skin alien, which is an alien robot, in 1959. This is before Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. And so this is a long time ago. And basically, the elephant skin alien looks like this. They have a wrinkly skin that would dissipate heat, like laser heat. The body looks like this. It's a robot, and it's used by the parent extraterrestrial group. It's the same group of aliens that were from Pasaguela, Mississippi in 1973, Hickson and Parker. It's exactly the same group, but I met them in 1959. That's way long time ago. And what they did is they did a demonstration for me. It was the year before I was supposed to enter school, kindergarten. And so they have the ability to go backwards and forwards in time, and they knew that I would be a scientist and earn a doctoral degree way back in 1959. They know this because they can go both backwards and forwards in time. And what they did with me is they did a demonstration. They didn't write like equations on a blackboard or anything like that. What they did is they put me in this field, which is kind of like a cloud, and it's just big enough to cover a person. And they can create these fields around their spacecraft. And what happens is time can slow down close to zero. It doesn't go all the way back to zero, but it goes close to zero. And when that happens, then they can also remove the gravitational field. So what they do is they put these fields around their craft, and so they can travel much faster than what we think. Our mainstream scientists say, oh, well, they can only go to the speed of light or a fraction of the speed of light. But this isn't true, because if you could slow time down, then the definitions of speed and velocity are changed, like miles per hour, feet per second. Those definitions have to be thrown out once you can control time. So they can move much faster. So if they're 200 light years out, it doesn't take them 200 years to get here. They can get here much faster. And the problem is the mainstream scientific community doesn't understand that the physics that they have is way, way more advanced than anything that we have. Now, it's true that we have black project scientists that have been back engineering this for a long, long time, for 60 or 80 years. They've been back engineering the technology. So they do know more of the alien science today, but it's in secret. So the general public doesn't know. And the reason the general public doesn't know is because the existence of extraterrestrials and alien science is always been classified for 80 years or 100 years. And this started with Tesla in the 1890s. And what a lot of people don't know is a guy named Marconi, who's the Italian. And remember, the Italians and the Germans were allies. And in the 1930s, they were allies. And but what happened is Marconi picked up on some of Tesla's anti-gravitational work from the 1930s. A lot of people don't know that the technology was actually back engineered in 1933 and in 1934 by both the Germans and the Soviet Union. Stalin sent teams down to Antarctica in 1933, and then Hitler found out about it, and he sent his own teams down to Antarctica in 1934. Now, this is before the 1938 expedition that Germany sent down to Antarctica, but what people don't know is both the Germans and the Soviet Union under Stalin had discovered aliens and anti-gravity technology a long time ago, back in the 1930s. And what happened is there was the military-industrial complex in Germany and the Soviet Union also that branched off from the mainstream government. They branched off from Hitler. They branched off from Stalin. And they kept the information to themselves. So small groups, breakaway groups, the military-industrial complex branched off from the government, and they developed this anti-gravity technology. So I'm going to read a statement from research articles that I dug up myself when I was researching Honeyboo German flying saucers a long time ago. And I came upon a document called the Kohler Converter. The Kohler Converter is this document here, and basically, I'll try to post this, but there's an important statement here. Hans Kohler was a German military person, Captain Hans Kohler of Germany, and he developed an anti-gravity device and a free energy device. The free energy device was very strong permanent magnets that are in the shape of a hexagon. And they have wires wrapped around and switches. It's in this article here, which we will post. But here's the most important part of this article. It says, in particular, this generating device appears to be the fundamental groundwork for a generating device of the German flying saucer program. Specifically, the Kohler Converter was an onboard free energy battery electrical generator that was used in Honeyboo flying saucers. It was coupled to a Van de Graaff, which is a high voltage band generator, and here's where Marconi comes in, and to a Marconi spherical dynamo, a giant hollow sphere of spinning mercury. So what they do is they take mercury liquid and they vaporize it, they pressurize it, and they spin it around very fast in a very strong magnetic field. And what happens? It shapes an electric field, and the electric field is separated out from the electromagnetic field. The electric field forms a vortex. It's kind of like a tornado, and then it's spinning around very, very fast under high pressure, and it ends up producing an anti-gravitational push against the force of gravity. And it says the whole anti-gravity drive was called the Thule tachynator, in the name of the secret society that organized the research. The devices were produced under the tightest securities in the factories of AEG and Siemens Corporation. These are German corporations. But officially, other people have said, oh, no, they never developed the anti-gravity technology. But this is not true. And I have cross-confirming evidence from a different source. And the other, now that's from this German scientific paper. The paper was I will post the most important parts of this paper later on. You can take a look at this. But so my point is the anti-gravity technology was back engineered a long time ago, but a lot of people will deny it, including the so-called experts, because I challenged somebody on Coast to Coast about this last year, and they said, oh no, the Germans never developed, they gave up on it, they just stuck with rocket technology, which is not true. They have anti-gravity. And see, the anti-gravity technology was discovered a second time by Werner von Braun, who's the German scientist from Project Paperclip. He came in and discovered the same thing with his own group of engineers in the early to mid 1950s. So we got the anti-gravity electrogravitics technology twice. Once from crashed saucers by the Germans and the Russians, and once by Werner von Braun, who is the German scientist that developed the rockets for the Project Paperclip. So he was first working for Hitler, and then he ended up working for the Americans after the war. They recruited the German scientists to work for the American government. So we got the anti-gravity twice. And now a lot of our researchers have died. So way back in 1975, there or thereabouts, or 74, there was a lecture by somebody named Stanton Friedman, who's a University of Chicago master's degree in physics. He was a true scientist with strong credentials for physics. And he gave a lecture at Santa Ana College in Orange County, and it reviewed the Los Angeles Times article of February 26, 1942. It said, Army says alarm is real. And they had pictures of, and this is the Los Angeles Times newspaper, pictures of flying saucers that look like this. And what it was is they thought it was Japanese or German that came in over Culver City and Santa Monica. And they shined, they had blackouts, and they shined spotlights on this vehicle, and they shot 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft shells, and they couldn't knock it down because these devices form extremely strong, high. It's a high voltage electrogravitic force field. It's kind of like a force field, like in science fiction movies. And so it doesn't matter what they shoot at, like missiles or anti-aircraft shells. All these devices, all the weapons that they use will just bounce off these force fields because they have an extremely strong field. And what they do is they shelter the craft, and there's a theory that you're eliminating any influence of gravity waves or graviton particles or both from the Earth to the object. So basically the object becomes immune from the forces of gravity because they have a gravitic shielding mechanism that's this extremely strong field. And then they can also warp space. They can warp space, and basically the reason they move so fast, they move like the hummingbirds or the bumblebees. If you ever watched the hummingbirds or the bumblebees, now they're not using electrogravitics, but if you watch what they do, they move around extremely fast, and they basically become weightless. Now, there's a difference between mass and weight. So you will remember that, for example, there's an important difference between mass and weight. Basically, you can manipulate the weight without changing the mass. So a good example is a 100-kilogram man on the Earth weighs 100 kilograms. But you put him on the moon, maybe he only weighs between 17 to 45 kilograms, depending on the conversion factor that you use. Because I haven't been up there, I don't know what the true conversion factor is. I don't know if I'm 100 kilograms, if I would weigh 17 kilograms on the moon or 45. But the point is, for any given mass, the weight can be different. Now, if you put that same 100-kilogram man on Jupiter, assuming you could even stand on Jupiter, maybe he would weigh 2,000 kilograms. And he would be so heavy that he would be flattened out because the gravitational force of Jupiter would be so strong that it would basically crush them. So basically, this anti-gravitational method has been around for a long time. Now, I was able to extract an article called Electrogravitic Systems. This article is not known by most people. This is a classified, all this information is highly classified. You can't find it anywhere. And I'm going to read a passage out of this. It says, they create a modification of the gravitational field around themselves, which is analogous to putting them on an incline of a hill. They act like a surfboard on a wave. The electrogravitic saucer creates its own hill, which is a local distortion of the gravitational field. Then it takes this hill with it in any chosen direction at any rate. So when they say that, it's impossible for them to do the things that they're doing, that's not true, because they're basically stepping out of our space-time into their own space-time field. And there's different names for it. You can call it a hyperspace envelope, or you could call it a supercavitation quantum vacuum. They create these spaces. They're stepping outside of space-time, so there are no G-forces for these guys. And when our scientists look at it and say, well, they can't do that, they would get smashed with the G-forces. Well, that's not true, because they're outside of our space-time. If they were in our space-time and did what they did, then it would be true. But they step outside of our space-time, and so it's not true. It's not true that they would get crushed with G-forces. That's not true at all. So our scientists are basically guilty of not understanding the super advanced science and physics that these aliens have. They don't know. They don't know. And there was another confirming piece of evidence that fits into this. In the 1990s, there was a paranormal research group from Australia. It's called the West Sydney Paranormal Research Group, and there was a researcher from Santa Monica, California, who was a video producer, and then there was a paranormal researcher from Australia. And what they did is they were trying to document what was happening at the Sydney Harbor shipbuilding facility, which was on an island in the bay of Sydney Harbor. It was in It was on an island, but they had a shipbuilding facility, and they had strange activity. So they hired paranormal researchers to go out and investigate. And what they found is, at first they thought it was a ghost, and later on they said, no, it's not a ghost. It's a gray alien, which is one of the classic extraterrestrials. And what they found out is they were approached by researchers that were inside Black Project researchers from Australia, and they wanted to bring the information out to the public. So what they did is they gave the video producer from Santa Monica, they gave him and Colin Powell a package of information, of inside information that nobody knows about, because the Black Project people are the insiders. They're not allowed to give the information to the general public. It has to do with national security. It has to do with upsetting social groups like religious groups, with classical science groups, and so on. So the whole project was done in secret, but what they did is they verified that there were two alien groups that were from Antarctica. Now this is from the group in Australia. They found out that the entity that they filmed an entity at this shipbuilding facilities at Sydney Harbor. And at first they thought it was a ghost, and it later on turned out to be a gray alien after they reviewed it. But they didn't really want to believe it, but they said, yeah, I guess it's an alien. And then what they found out is the grays in a taller group of extraterrestrials that's 10 or 12 feet tall were found in Antarctica. And when the Germans and the Russians went down there in 34 and 33, they told the humans that, leave us alone, we don't want you to bother us. The reason they were down there, they were going to mine oil and uranium out of Antarctica. And the aliens came out and said, no, we don't want you down here. And so what happened is the Germans went back in 34 under Hitler's command, and they shot down one of the gray alien ships. This is where they got the Marconi dynamo gyro. And by the way, anything that's related to Tesla and Marconi is classified. It's classified because the science that they have led to the anti-gravitational information, and all of that is highly classified.